Are Neanderthals the ancestors of modern Europeans? Let's find out! Okay, so I'm going to say at the beginning of this video that yes, the Neanderthals are the ancestors, the forebears of the European people. Now, who are Europeans? Anyone with blue eyes, blonde hair, white skin, etc. If you're Germanic, if you're Russian, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as you have those three characteristics, you're European. And you are, in origin, a Neanderthal. Now, this is very contradictory to science, SOYENCE. However, I'm going to explain to you, using science, why this is the true theory and why it's probably going to be accepted in a couple of years. Okay, so before I get into that, I'm going to have to go through a bunch of terms first, so that you understand we're on the same page. Here's a map of Afro-Eurasia. I'm going to explain what are Homo sapiens, what are Neanderthals, what are Aryans, what are Hyperboreans. Okay, it's very complicated. Let's get into it. First of all, who are the Homo sapiens? Now, the Homo sapiens evolved around here in Ethiopia about 500 to 300,000 years ago and very quickly spread throughout most of Africa. Now, these are an African hunter-gatherer species. They typically had black skin, dark hair, dark-colored eyes, frizzy, curly hair that was a bit strange. They lived a predominantly hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Now, the word Homo sapien translates to English from Latin as wise man. Now, they weren't that wise, but they were pretty walking. They walked a lot, like Homo erectus, the upright man. They spread all the way throughout the Arab Peninsula, the Iranian plateaus and mountains, throughout India, and the south of China. Now, these people were found everywhere, and I believe that they make up most of the ancestors of most humans alive on Earth, especially the Africans, who are about 100%, sometimes 80%, because they have ancestorship from other things like Naledi and Heidelbergensis and other hominid species. Don't want to touch on that. But these are the range of the Homo sapiens. The next are the Neanderthal. The Neanderthal are named after Neanderthal Cave in Germany, where they were initially discovered. Now, through most of their history, we believed them to be dumb cavemen, but we slowly began to learn that they were a lot like us, way more than we think. So the Neanderthal had blue eyes and blonde hair. They stood upright. They were a bit taller than most Homo sapiens. They lived here throughout Europe, as well as in Siberia and Eurasia. They had white skin. They were very European. They practiced things like art. They buried their dead. They had a pretty advanced hunting culture. And the big one, they looked completely different from all the other hominids. And they existed throughout most of Europe. However, around 70,000 years ago, a bit after these migrations of the Homo sapiens into these regions, the Homo sapiens migrated into Europe, from Spain through Italy and through Anatolia. And these people mixed with these other Europeans, these Neanderthals, to form a group called Cro-Magnon. Now, Cro-Magnon were brown. Okay, these are the race mixed baby hapamutts. They looked really fucked up. Here are some European farmer people from the cultures Châtelperronian, Magdalenian, etc. These people looked fucking stupid. Okay, these are not Europeans at all. After this migration of the Homo sapiens from Africa into the European homeland, the Neanderthals existed as a pure species around this area. And that is where you get to the very foundations of the first culture I'm going to go over, the Hyperboreans. So the Hyperboreans, the Scythians, or whatever you want to call them, I'll call them Hyperboreans for now, were a culture that evolved here. I'm giving them this region because it's the space between a site called Kavelinsk and another very important site that has their archaeological records. Between this area is the homeland of the so-called Hyperboreans. Now, where does the word Hyperborean come from? If we look at this map from the ancient Greeks, these cultures were just called the Hyperboreans as part of the Scythians. Hyperboreans means beyond Boreas, which is the north wind. So this is just the name I'm giving to them. This is probably not what they called themselves, obviously, but these cultures were here. They had blue eyes, blonde hair, etc. They were very Aryan culture, and they migrated quite a bit. So their main characteristic is because they lived so far north, they had Asiatic, kind of Asian type, epicanthic folded, hooded eyes. Now these actually became one of the big ancestral components throughout the Chinese. They mixed a lot through here, they migrated into the Americas, and they migrated across into Scandinavia to form the majority of the Scandinavian hunter-gatherer SHG people. Now the Scandinavian hunter-gatherers migrated around 15 to 20,000 years ago. They were very, very early. The next Neanderthal groups that came over to these places were called the Western Steppe herders. Now these came here and formed a culture in this region. This culture, which you might know from a bunch of people, are called the Aryans. And the Aryans comprised roughly this land originally. I'm going to mark them with A for Aryan. Now the Aryans, or the Western Steppe herders or whatever, were steppe pastoralists. They rode horses and they conquered tribes around them. They began to expand rapidly, more rapidly than almost any other culture in the entire history of the world. They first made some little migrations over here into places like Andronovo, where they formed the Tokharians here. They made some other migrations down here, which became the Aryan invasion of India, including the site at Santashta. They formed another migrations thing into Babylonians, or back then they were called the Sumerians. And of course, the most famous, they made the Yamnaya invasion into Europe. This is one of the first times that blonde hair and blue eyes got reintroduced into mainland Europe. Scandinavian hunter-gatherers mostly stuck to this region of Norway and Sweden. So this is the ancient Aryan invasion of Europe. So these people rode in with a system called the Koryos system. So Koryos were basically, if you're a male and you reached adolescence around the age of 16, 17, 18, you were given a horse and you were tasked with going into neighboring tribes and raiding them, taking over their cities and destroying them to create more land and more inhabitants for the Aryan race. And they spread their genes a lot. There was a shit ton of rape. And they formed the basis of the largest Central European Aryan culture, which I'll call here the corded ware culture. Now, the corded ware culture kind of mixed with the Scandinavian hunter-gatherer culture to form something called the Nordic battle axe Bronze Age culture. And the rest of the corded ware kind of spread their genetics throughout Europe, maintaining this big area. So there were some later Aryan invasions. I'll talk about them later in the video. You'll see them, but some of them were the Celtic and the Scythian migrations. So those came in a bit later. So here's the state of Europe. Let's go over a quick recap. Homo sapiens explore all this. They come all these places. Neanderthals exist in Europe and a bit of Asia. The Homo sapiens come here. They occupy the homeland. Europeans come back because they came from Hyperborea. They migrated back in slowly. And now Europe is no longer looking like these fucked up people and is now looking like these Giga Chad Aryans. Okay, they're fucking insane. Patrick Bateman, American Psycho schizos. So this map looks very complicated. Allow me to simplify it here. Blah, blah, blah. You get this. Now that I simplified this, I'm going to go over a little bit more history, and then I'm going to get into the genetics component of this video. So here we have some of the extra invasions into Europe. As you saw from that earlier Greek map, you can see here they're the Agarthusi, the Scythians, the Cassidones, the Sauromades, all these other cultures, and the Hyperboreans, of course, if you look up here. And also, here's another note. There's Atlantis here and shit. If you know about the Riz chat, it's pretty crazy. I might make a video on that. Blah, 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 whatever. So we have here the Aryans of the steppe. The Aryans have already come into Europe. This is around 4,000 years ago. There's another invasion, this time of the Celtic people. They come in, the Celto-Italics. It's a common branch of Italy and Celtia. Eventually they formed the Roman Empire and the Germanic Celtic empires. And that was the last invasion from the Aryans. Okay, now let's get into the genetic component of this theory. So here's something you might not know. The average person is between 1.5% and 7% exclusively Homo sapien. What? How is that possible? Okay, I thought SOYENCE told you that you are a Homo sapien. It's not, and a quick little Google search will prove this idea wrong. So, of your DNA, a lot of it is exclusive to all living creatures. Like, for example, if you compare this human with this banana, they share about 60% of the same DNA. If you compare a human with a chimpanzee, they share about 95%. So, you are 95% genetically equivalent to a chimp. So if you look at the amount of Neanderthal exclusive DNA that Europeans have, or if you look at, let's look at other races first. So Africans, it's around 0%. Obviously, they're from Africa. There are no Neanderthals there, nobody to mix with. Let's look at some other races like the Asians. Now it gets interesting. It could be around 1.3%, 2.3%, etc. And Europeans is between 2.6% and 4.6%, according to this study. Okay, with this information, since we know that the average blue-eyes, blonde-haired Nordic European is only 1% or less Homo sapien exclusively in terms of DNA, and is also 4.6% or more, up to 7% in some cases, Neanderthal exclusively DNA, this makes a lot more things make sense. We are literally a different species from most other humans, and that manifests in every aspect of our culture, from our long list of inventions, the land we've controlled, the empires we've built, our IQ differences, our cultural differences, our physiological differences. For example, Europeans have features that almost no one else has, like blue eyes, colored eyes for that matter, blonde hair, colored hair for that matter, white skin, which is very rare. Only people in Asia kind of have whitish skin. It's really yellow. But they're also they share a genetic similarity with us, in that they also have around half the Neanderthal admixture that we have. They're pretty close to us. And there's other things too, like an occipital bun, a brow ridge. Certain parts of the skull are very congruent with modern Europeans and Neanderthals, etc., etc., etc. Now, we are literally a different species, but modern science, SOYENCE, would not tell you that. Why? Because it's compromised. Okay, this might sound like cope, but think about it for like 5 seconds. Look at all the shit that's happened with COVID-19.
You are the unvaccinated. You are the problem. It is the unvaccinated who are the problem. Period. End of story.
The only people that you can blame. The only people you can blame. This isn't shaming, this is the truth. Maybe they should be shamed. Are the unvaccinated.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. Anyone you came into contact with will blame you, as will the rest of us.
Pfizer, scientific papers, heart disease comes from people tying their shoelaces or watching TV, or how exercise can be harmful for you, or how red meat or eggs are bad for you. Like, this is all complete bullshit. It's not true. It's obviously false. It's obviously not true. And there's this big anti-racist push to make it like we're all the same. The Europeans, they don't actually have a homeland. There's all these pushes in places like England and France to make people believe that our ancestors were brown. Which, if you had a time machine and you time traveled back around 10,000 years in Europe, you would see mostly brown people. But if you went back like 50,000 years, everybody would just look European, because we were literally pushed out. And I kind of find that ironic that it's happening again. Look at these massive immigration rates. Look at how they're trying to demographically replace Neanderthals in Europe with these disgusting swarthoids. Look how many of them in these caravans. It's horrific. It's white genocide. It's horrible. And the fact that this has already happened kind of gives me a little bit of hope, because I'm sure that, us as Europeans, as whites, will be able to survive this, and smaller outgroups in other places around the world. Maybe it's not Siberia this time. Maybe it's America. Maybe it's Australia. Who knows? But eventually, we will come back and we will return to our homelands.